Welcome to Birds in the Sky, the podcast where we explore how making art and music can be powerful tools for boosting mental health and well-being. Whether you're an artist, a musician, or simply someone looking for new ways to nurture your mind, we'll dive into creative practices, share inspiring stories, and uncover how the act of creating can lead to healing, self-discovery, and growth. Tune in and let your creativity carry you forward. I'm your host, Matthew Crane. Let's fly.
So I came into it kind of into the 7X project, like really wanting to help and just be a part of it. But as an artist, there's kind of like limitations, especially financial means and limitations that I have. But for me, art has always been there, and it's just kind of been that thing that's been my path, right? There's been so many instances where I try to stay healthy and exercise because that really does beat out a lot of stress and anxiety. But there's moments where I can't outrun the demons, right? I can't bench press off the emotions. So it's like I needed to always figure out another way to do something. And then there's so many it's just a missed opportunity, I think. There's a lot of chest beating podcasts with Green Berets and Navy SEALs about war and being tough. And then when they are kind of opening up, it's kind of a guarded opening where they use exercise and diet and cold plunges and these extreme things to really.
It's safe. Answer. Well, now to be fair, do they help? You say you can't bench press your demons away. You can for a couple minutes.
Yes.
And fair. As long as the dopamines are still flowing that's why one of the reasons I got into jujitsu is I can't deal with any of my demons when somebody's trying to choke the shit out of me.
Right. Right.
So it's really just tapping into Maslow's hierarchy. Like I can't question philosophically my existential crisis when I'm trying to just survive.
Right.
And I found that way more therapeutic than going to the gym, and I'm not going to do cold plunge. It's just not going to happen. But those are safe. They work for a time until you recover, right? Or until your brain can now start processing again. But you don't have the energy, especially at our age, to get back in the gym right away to quiet those demons. So they do work for a time, and they're not going to cure you. But for podcasters, it's a safe thing to say. Because it's easy, because people want to hear it. It's tried and true. Everybody says it. So you're staying with the crowd. You're not really being too vulnerable, being like, oh, I deal with PTSD through cold plunge. No, you don't.
Right.
You're trying to get a cold plunge sponsor. That's all you're trying to do, bro.
Right. And like to get back into why I kind of got into this, you have to be kind of be crazy to be an artist and actively pursue art and do this, because it's not a lucrative thing, and you can't spend all of your time doing it because then your family will starve, or like I plumb and do construction, and that's kind of how I make money and stuff. But there's such powerful stories of healing and overcoming emotional dysregulation and even trauma through practicing an art practice, whether it's music or painting or writing or anything like that. And a couple of our friends and colleagues have been on the show already. Kagan using the piano to be able to use his fingers again. And
I saw Zach's.
And Zach was in the hospital. He couldn't run, he couldn't work out, he couldn't exercise. So you have to do something to get your mind right. And that's just kind of my lane, and I see value in it. And the arts are limited, and then a podcast about the arts is even more limited. So I'm not expecting a huge thing. I'm not trying to get a cold plunge sponsor, right? I don't, I doubt there's going to be a paintbrush sponsors, right?
Got enough paintbrushes. In fact, I'm pretty sure I subsidize Hobby Lobby.
Exactly.
Not the other way around.
So this is really a passion project for me. And I joined 7X because my younger brother was in the Army, and he killed himself in 2009 or 2016. He just couldn't shake a drug addiction, and he got a drug addiction because he got hurt in the Army and started getting painkillers, and that just kind of was like a downhill, trajectory and stuff like that. But I appreciate you coming on. I think this is going to be a fascinating perspective, and if it's okay, I wanted to read something from your website to kind of kick us off.
Okay. You mean my free website that I don't know how to tie in credit cards and billing, and
I can help you with that offline if you want afterwards.
bro, I never went into it because I didn't have enough demand. And I'm just like, and so I just can't wrap my head around. There's just some things that artists can do, and then technical stuff, I'm like, I just can't.
Yes, for sure, man. And when I used my GI Bill to go back to school, people were like, "You're not going to school for art or music?" I was like, "I already know how to do those things.
Yeah.
That's a skill set I don't need help with. I don't know anything about computers." So I went for CIS, which is like a basic computer science, kind of limited computer science degree to help. I learned a couple of programming languages and stuff like that.
Wow.
But it helped me be able to get my website up, and it helped me be able to dial in credit cards and accept payments and all that stuff. It was not easy.
Yeah.
I cheated a lot because obviously I come from the military background. So if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
Cooperate and graduate.
Like, yeah. So
what is cheating anyways? Unless you're going to be a solo entrepreneur, you're going to work in a collaborative environment. You might as well start in school.
Right. But yes, in any case, I'm going to read this real quick. I think it's a good kind of introduction to who you are. And I'll also do my intro to this as well. Welcome to another episode of Birds in the Sky podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Crane. Today, we have my friend, Bryce Hansen. We've worked together on a pretty awesome global, I guess you call it research project called the 7X Human Performance Project, trying to find alternatives to big pharma and the suicide epidemic ripping through the veteran communities. But Bryce is a former Green Beret commander, a graduate of the West Point Academy. And in Bryce's time in the Special Forces, it resulted in a predominant, persistent problem in his personal life, emotional detachment. I think we can all who have served feel some level of that emotional detachment. So when you return home, it left you struggling to connect with your civilian community and friends and family. I can echo that as well. So desperately wanting to affect change in his life and needing to complete his journey back home of being present as a father, a husband, and a friend who could love and be loved, Bryce turned to art. And a quote, which I love, which I'd like to elaborate on, is, "My art is a safe place where I can be completely open and honest. So while I paint to be free, I paint as a means to relearn how to be vulnerable and love." And I think that's super powerful. I don't know if you want to elaborate at where you were kind of at when you put those words down.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I've had big pivot points in you come to forks in the road, and those moments is what people focus on. Well, which one do you go, left or right? And then I've had those moments where, okay, well, I took a left or I took a right. And then I sometimes wonder what would life been like if I'd gone the other route. One of those was everybody in my high school went to college. And then I enlisted in the Army because I was, out of like 800 people, I was the only person who didn't get accepted to college. And I was a good kid. I didn't get into too much trouble. It's not like I was the junkie. Even the junkies got into college. Right. So I went to the Army. That was a pretty big, prominent fork in the road. Luckily, I got into West Point because I had a great first sergeant who pushed me that route. And then, I had another fork in the road when I went to Iraq and started working around special forces. And then I was like, well, I want to do this. So I went that route. And then when I chose to get out of the military, right, you're going to get out one day, no matter what. But that's still a hard fork in the road, and for me, that was a very scary fork because I just had a baby. I live in Germany. The job I had lined up in Dubai fell through. It's just like, oh my goodness, I had no plan. My plan was the job in Dubai. Now all of a sudden I have no plan. So people talk about transition and you got to have a plan. Yeah, my plan went to shit. And now I got a 3-month-old and no job, no resume, you know, because I got in the job through like a friend of a friend. And
Right.
so I really, you know, and as a man, as a husband, as a father, you just bury everything, right? And I think a lot of times, well, obviously we could talk about how unhealthy that is, but also how normal that is and how necessary that is. I think a lot of people talk about, I don't know where we want to go with this. I'm just kind of like, maybe we're talking about art and being vulnerable and being free. So I'm saying what's on my mind. I think it's very important for guys to bury that shit down, right? If you can't be the calm person, the one who at least on the surface looks like nothing phases you and everything's going to be okay, doesn't matter what's on the inside. Your wife, your kids, your family, your whatever is looking at you. They need somebody that's got it figured out. Fake it till you make it, right? Well, there'll be a lot of people say how unhealthy that is, but also how necessary that is in a self-sacrificial way. Like sometimes you sacrifice your mental health for the sake of other people's mental health, right? The important part is to know when to raise your hand and say, okay, it's too dark in here. I can't keep putting more in and internalizing it. There's just no more space. And that's when I think people make bad decisions or risky decisions or things to curb the demons that are overwhelming them. One thing that I did though was I started painting to try as an outlet to where I could just shut my mind down and like process something. I didn't realize the science behind it. And a lot of times I would like to paint and think about happy thoughts. And I would like to paint and be like, oh, and really get into the painting.
Happy little tree, happy little cloud.
Yeah. Man, Bob Ross, like great guy, but I don't know how he did it. Did you know, tangent, Bob Ross had cancer?
No.
He died of cancer. And the thing that killed him was the paint thinner.
Oh, that makes sense.
So he would dip his thing in paint thinner, and then you watch old episodes. He would hit the paintbrush on the easel to like smear the extra, but that atomized all the paint thinner, and he was breathing all of that stuff in for years. It gave him cancer, and then he went on a binge. Like the last 2 years he lived, he filmed like every day. He was cranking out like 3 or 4 episodes a day for like the last 2 years of his life because he's just like, my job here of painting is not complete. It was driving him. The thing that killed him, and he never stopped doing it either.
Uh-oh.
He just accepted it. And it's just like, I wish in those moments, he's dying of the thing that he's born to do, and yet he's still happy. And he's like, I was like, once you know the backstory, I'm like, how could you be happy? Because when I paint, I think of the worst shit. I'm like, I hate this motherfucker. They did me wrong. And it's stuff that I haven't thought about in decades. And it's like, but as soon as I get in, and it's not like, if you had asked me like, hey, what are you going to think about in 5 minutes when you start painting? I don't know, the painting and this and the techniques. And no, once I get into a flow, my brain goes to places where I'm just like, this is bad place, which I think a lot of people would be like, oh, that's not what art therapy is for. It's to like, so then I did a science experiment with a guy named Vincent Vargas, actor, I think he was he's a former Ranger, border guy. He was an actor. I think he was in the Mayan show, spin-off of Sons of Anarchy. Good dude. So one of my coaches in jiu-jitsu is a Ranger bat guy, and they were Ranger buddies together back in the day. So he's like, hey man, this guy is looking for a bunch of soft guys to come do like this baseball stuff. You got time on Sunday? I've got nothing to do. I'll go hang out with some vets. I try to avoid the whole veteran thing, but if it's a soft guy, I have a soft spot in my heart. If they're trying to do something for the community, then I'll go try to support them. Right.
What is soft for our listeners?
Special operations. So Rangers fall, I was special forces. Rangers fall under special operations.
And they're different.
They're different.
different hierarchy, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say different hierarchy, is different mission. It's
Yeah,
a little
different domains.
completely different domains. For brevity, I would put like Navy SEALs and Rangers kind of in the same domain. Shock and awe, do the village, a lot of dudes, a lot of guns. You don't want to be on the wrong side of those guys.
Right.
We're special forces / Green Berets, it's a moniker, are more diplomat warriors. I'm happy to go talk to a guy and I got a gun. We can go that route. It's more carrots and sticks. It's more of a dialogue. It's more of like, what's the real, more like the Defense Department's consultants. So like
civil affairs.
Yes. There's an element of that, right? Sure. There's a department, special civil affairs falls under special operations where they're more hearts and minds. We're more hearts and minds on a diplomatic side with the hammer as an option.
Sure.
Got it. Right. And Al Capone had a great quote. He's like, you can get a lot further with a kind word and a gun than just a kind word. And I think that's what would differentiate Green Berets.
I think that sums up Green Berets pretty well, actually.
Yeah, I think that's where you would draw the line between where civil affairs starts and Green Berets start. And I had a guy in, I'm going off on a tangent. I won't tell that story.
Well, that's okay. You were talking about you started painting. So did you paint prior to the service, or did you just jump into this?
High school art class, drawing, and that's kind of really what I like to do is draw. But then I realized it's taking way too long to get a concept out on paper. So I started painting. It's faster and I can juggle more content. I can produce more content painting than I can drawing with graphite. But I went to this guy, Vincent Vargas, and he was doing a study for his PhD on athletics or sports and PTSD. He had all like the hookups with the brains and doing questionnaires and therapy, and you're looking at all these different metrics, like 7X, a big medical experiment targeting how to process PTSD. And I sat down with him and he's explaining the science behind, we just went to a batting cage because that's his thing. And he's like, I want you to go out there and try to hit the ball, but I want you to think about the darkest shit you got going on in your life now or before or whatever. He's like, I don't even care if you hit the ball. I want you to go out there and get yourself depressed. I want you to go into a dark place. Kind of weird experiment is this? Like, isn't this the opposite of what we're trying to do? He explained, and I was surprised because once he goes, but the more I try to hit the ball and process, it's something to do with, and I think he'd be a great person to talk to when you're doing something tactile and you're thinking of something, it moves the ideas, the things that are holding you down, the things that you've been, as men, we bury, whether they were because we're in combat or stress of a job or a divorce or whatever it is, childhood trauma, whatever it is. If you're doing something tactile, sports, painting, and you're processing all of those things, and I was doing this without even realizing it and the science behind it, it moves it from a dark place to an unemotional place where it's the wiring of working with your hands while you're thinking about something negative. Now it says you're being productive, you're being creative, and it takes kind of some of the sting. I know there's scientific terms that I'm not familiar with, but it basically takes the sting of the pain from those incidents and it recompartmentalizes it as I am functional right now. I can function. I can swing the bat. I can paint. I can be productive and process these things simultaneously, where a lot of people succumb to PTSD and they end up in a suicidal state because they can no longer process. They can no longer be productive with their demons. And that's when, you have the demons overcome them and they look to escape the pain because they've lost the ability to be productive.
So when you learned about the science behind it, did you take that as like an element to double down on painting and be like, okay, well, this is kind of how this manifests for me is by painting and drawing, or was it more of a slow burn?
I think it was more of a validation because I just did this experiment with him maybe like 6 months ago, but I've been painting almost for 15 years now.
Got it.
But I don't have the negative talk of like, what's wrong with you? Why are you thinking about this? And now I embrace it. And I try to be more forgiving of others and of myself Because at least I'm mindful of the benefit, and I don't say, oh, you're being negative, or you're thinking about this bad situation or this person. And instead of saying, hey, you need to shut that off and, just learn to forgive them or forgive yourself. No, I'm going to stay here in this dark place while I'm painting, and I'm going to move it from a dark place to a functional and recompartmentalize the pain and put it into something that where I can still be productive and move forward. So, and then to be fair, there's other times I just put on a bunch of trance music and just zone out completely, so it just, it's kind of hit or miss. I want to be having a bad day and be like, what I need to do today is I need to paint, because that's good for my mind. I never really go through those processes. Sometimes I just need to, and I'm sure you can feel there's just a need to create. There's a need to produce. And sometimes what I need to do is sit on the couch with my wife and cuddle with her and be emotionally available, even if we're not talking, but just be available and be present. And at the same time, I'm conflicted because there's a drive inside me that needs to produce as well. I need to create. And sometimes those things come into conflict, so yeah, it's,
I have the same.
I'm fancy, but wrap that up. I went into too many different directions.
No, that was perfect, because I had this thought yesterday. It kind of occurred to me that the same mechanism inside of me that says it's raining, seek shelter, or I'm hungry, get food, or I'm thirsty, get water. That's the same mechanism that tells me to get up and go create something. Yeah. I don't have a thought like, oh, I'm going to paint some flowers today, or I'm going to do a portrait. It's not like that at all. I could be washing a dish and drying a dish, and all of a sudden I have to go. Yeah. And like for a long time, people in my life, friends, family, especially growing up, this has always been me. Okay. Like since I was a little kid. Yeah. And it's, it comes into conflict a lot of places, a lot of times, because I walked out of a band rehearsal one time. A friend of mine had just died of a drug overdose. And my bandmates were not friends with this person, but I was very much struggling with it. And I showed up to rehearsal that day, and my band members were just bickering back and forth about the show and the set list, something that was just so overwhelmingly meaningless to where I was in that state. Mm-hmm. I walked out of the rehearsal and said, fuck you guys, I need to go do something else. And I went and painted and took care of my emotional stuff. I'm still friends with these guys, but I 100% identify with what you're saying with that. Those things do come into conflict with each other sometimes.
For sure.
Okay. So when the quote I opened up with, so while I paint to be free, I paint as a means to relearn how to be vulnerable and love. So how does that work when you're painting and you're trying to relearn? So it doesn't mean like when you paint, you are vulnerable and you access love. So the process itself is relearning how to find or how to access that. It sounds like acceptance, right? To kind of just accept where you're at, accept your thoughts, like face them and acknowledge them.
Yeah. I think the best way to kind of explain this is when I started painting when I got out of the military. So I left Special Forces and I started painting, and I'm not a landscape person. Like I've jumped into like, what's my favorite subject? Naked chicks. So let's
easy go.
I'm not a brainiac. I'm not, nobody's going to invite me to, a philosophy cocktail party to hear me pontificate, right? I like naked chicks.
So did Picasso. You're in good company.
So I'm like, that's an easy thing for me to paint, and I don't want it to make it be crude or vulgar, because the topic is love. So I associated, and I'm sure a lot of guys do as well, I associated sex with love. They were synonymous, right? If we're not having sex, then it clearly means you don't love me, right? And that was the only validation that I brought something to the marriage and to the relationship. It's like, well, if you're not having sex with me, then why are we together? You don't love me, so because I didn't feel like I brought too much to the table besides my ego. And so I was looking for validation, right? That I was wanted and that I was loved and I had value in a relationship to somebody else. And so a lot of the things that I was painting early on was trying to start a conversation and tiptoe and be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. Are you also thinking about it? Because I need validation right now. Because as much as I exude ego and borderline arrogance and cockiness, as I've been accused of in the past, I'm actually quite, I would self-identify as quite humble, but in reality, I'm quite fragile. I am confident in what I bring to the table as far as operations, tactical, war fighting type stuff, right? I'm very extremely confident in that, probably arrogant. But when it comes to being a human being, when it comes to being a husband, a father, I'm very insecure, and I need a lot of validation in that. And so painting for me was like, hey, I was painting subjects that were trying to start a conversation of an immature perspective of what love is. So the way my website is set up is chronological. So you'd have to start at the very beginning, at the bottom of the webpage, and start scrolling up, and you'll start seeing different genres. Or I might get like on a Vietnam War kick. Somebody'd be like, hey, I need some paintings on Vietnam. And then I'd do like 3 or 4 in a row. You can clearly see, okay, that was a phase. He never revisited that phase. That was come and go. But you'll see girls throughout, sprinkled throughout. I do less nudes. I do less sexual content now, unless somebody's like saying, hey, can you do this for me as a present for my wife or for my husband, like a boudoir kind of thing, as like a private commission or something like that. I have some concept pieces like erotic, sensual, sublime stuff that like I've worked out, but I would probably never paint, put it on canvas, and probably would never publish it because I don't need to have those conversations anymore. I don't need to, my understanding of love has vastly matured, and and it's more complex than just a sexual transaction. And so the paintings have changed. And I like to think that while the talent and the technique, the mastery of the technique and my style has matured as well, just through practice and repetition, but so is the content a little bit more matured than just let me paint a girl in lingerie kind of thing.
So you started this explaining this, saying you couldn't pontificate about it, but you just did a stellar job really intellectually unwrapping your subject of choice that makes a lot of appearances in your work.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know it. I've wrestled with it a lot because because any podcast I'm on, they're like, why do you paint this? Why do you that? It's the same question that I've had all my neighbors in every house that I've ever lived in, and why a lot of my paintings end up in the garage and not in the family-friendly area where neighbors might come over, because they're going to be like, why would you paint this? And then why would you also display it? Are you swinger? Are
Right.
you trying to entice us? Is that why you invite us over for coffee? And then you have all this erotic art up. Like, what? We can't be friends. You know, you go out to dinner with somebody and then you get in the car with your spouse, your girlfriend, your significant other, and you're like, they were cool. Or we could hang out with them. And I'm like, no, we're not hanging out with them again.
Did you see what was on his wall?
Right. And if you have those conversations when you get in the car after a restaurant, what about if they come over to your house? And so there's a lot of stuff that I wouldn't paint because it would just be for me. And where am I going to put it? Right. And no matter what, I still look for the approval of my wife on the content. I could get a bunch of likes or comments or shares or reposts, whatever, on Instagram, and that doesn't matter. Does my wife like it or not? Did she heart it? Nobody else's like on Instagram matters. Did she heart it or did she not heart it? That's all that matters. Is it going to go up in the house or is it going to go in the garage? That's the next question. Are you selling it or are you giving it away? Because please, dear God, nobody's going to pay for that. Just get rid of it and give it away. Yeah.
We have that in common. I make a lot of work that is just for me. And I think
that's the ultimate maturity as an artist. Everybody starts out being like, oh, I'm trying to practice. I'm trying to create. And then you get enough validation from your friends and family. Oh, you're really good. And you start to believe it. And you're like, you know what? I'm really good. I could probably sell this stuff. Everybody wants my stuff. No, your cousin wants it. A free one. Your parents want one for the fridge, you know, like you're a little kid, like, and you start believing in the niche hype of like, oh, I'm good. I can make money off of this. I'm going to be the one to break the starving artist stigma. And then as you mature, you realize I'm not painting to sell it. I'm just painting it for me.
Yeah.
You know? And so like I don't really want to take too many commissions anymore. I still do for some, but I struggle with giving a price because I either want to paint it for you and you can pay me for my time and my materials, or I'm going to throw out a ridiculous number. And if you're dumb enough to pay it, then I'll paint it. But I don't really want to paint it because I want to paint for me. So if your project, your commission inspires me, you're going to get a great price because I want to do it. If your project doesn't inspire me, then you're going to pay through the nose to the point where you're probably going to say no because I just don't want to paint it. And I've matured to now where I'm going to just paint what I want versus taking people's advice. Oh, you're a soldier. You should paint soldiers. People love supporting the veteran community. You should paint soldiers. I might riff on the veteran community supporters for a second.
Yeah, whatever you need to, man. I mean, the art world itself is ridiculous. All
right, so here's
art shouldn't be like a commodity that is a banana duct taped to a wall, or like it's just so far from like the Neanderthal paintings in Spain of pigs in caves that are 60,000 years old. Like they're not doing that to, obsidian. That's not what they were doing it for. It was to tell stories and to connect with other people in their tribe.
I think an artist has to learn to be honest with themselves. I think a lot of artists and people calling themselves artists are pretentious and they want the title without the work. They want the virtue signaling of whatever art community will applaud you for. And that's when you get this performance artist, you get the still art, you get the banana, you get all the bullshit you see on Instagram where the guy like pokes a bunch of holes in the bucket and spins it around and then okay.
That guy makes me think of the Big Lebowski, by the way. Maude.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Okay. Is there a place for that? Sure. In a CIA operation, K.A. Jackson Pollock, right? There's a place for that to confuse the masters in the Soviet Union and confound them. There's a place for that in a PSYOP. But if you can't answer the real reason, the true reason, and your real reason is just to get the likes, and you haven't matured to the point, I think you'll hold, how do I want to put this? You'll hold yourself back. You'll become stagnant in your ability, in your talent when you're trying to please other people with your art. If you're saying, and I'll jump back to this, but put a pin in this. So the veteran community, the veteran art supporting community, they don't want to buy anything that I make unless it can tie back to the military community. Okay, great. And then I have to dissect over 15 years of why is that? Why do my military pieces sell, but then my other stuff that's a little bit more controversial or more, you have to understand the story, the composition. You need to appreciate the time and the talent that went into it, right? To really appreciate the painting, you have to understand the backstory. Why do they do that? All right. So this is just my 15-year study into the people that buy veteran art. On the left, if I was a raging liberal, which I'm not, and I started doing climate change paintings or woke paintings, whatever it is that the crazy people on the left that our community supports, then I would do that and I would get all the applause and the virtue signaling validation. And I want to leave room for the people who truly that is their purpose in the art community and that they're doing that for the right reasons. Great. Go do that art. I support you. It's the ones who do it just for the virtue signaling applause because the brain doesn't know. It's still going to release the dopamines when you get the applause, whether that applause is genuine or it's faux. It's just virtue signaling. On the right side of the aisle, which I am also not a fan of, we don't have woke stuff on the right side. We have the veteran stuff. The problem is, support the veteran, hire a hero. It's 2000. That's 2007 was a long time ago. But you still have some strap hangers that want to be seen as supporting the veteran community, and they'll buy veteran art as long as it is veteran content. So that way they can put it up and they say, I tell their neighbor or their friend who comes over, see this painting of this soldier, this screaming soldier in anguish? I bought it from a Green Beret. And okay, it's like the priest who prays too loud and everyone says, look at him. Well, he got his reward here on earth. You got your fake virtue signaling. You got your attaboy now here on earth. If you get trapped in that cycle as an artist, I think you're going to get stymied and stagnant and cap yourself on your potential as an artist because you're just chasing the next round of applause. And you start, and you'll see, I did like 5 veteran Vietnam pieces in a row. I have no connection to Vietnam, but like people were liking it. All right, well, let me do another one. Let me do another one. And it's just like, I'm not going to do a 6th one or a 50th one. And I know some artists out there, they just copy paste the same thing. Let's say it's a person's face. They'll do the face this way. Then they do the face this way. Then they do the face this way. But it's the same face. It's the same technique. It's like, you're not growing as an artist. You have to challenge yourself, whether it's with new tech. You have to take risks. You have to be vulnerable, as my statement. If you're not willing to be vulnerable and take a risk and fail in a technique or fail in content, or I'm going to wrestle with this content and this topic, and I'm not really too concerned with what my neighbors say, or now there's a thin line. I still do care what my wife says.
Absolutely.
I'm risky, but I'm not that risky. I'm risky, but I'm not dumb, right? But you have to be willing to, am I holding myself back as an artist by refusing to paint some content? Maybe. I'll never know, right? Because I don't want to sleep on the couch. But I think artists have to understand their motive, and there's got to be some sense of purity in why they paint, not just what they paint, although those two things will merge, and they have in my journey. But I think that dialogue with yourself happens while you're creating as well. So if you want to get better in your technique, you need to create and spend time. If you want to understand your why, you need to create and spend time in the craft. If you want to find your true motive and merge the content with the increased talent and addressing it, you just have to spend more time creating. There's no shortcut to saying and trying to map what is the algorithm on Instagram or social media, or what is hot in the galleries right now. If you're chasing the crowd, you'll always be behind. If your sense of validation as an artist is getting into a gallery or selling to a dentist office, or to say, hey, I sold. Have you ever been in a dentist office and been like, wow, that's great art? No, you're like, that's shit art. That's barely considered art, but it's safe. I'm not into being safe. Let's leave a caveat. There's some artists that are self-actualizing by doing that safe art. And that's where we need them to do that. I don't want to say that dentist office, the person who created the art at the car dealership or the dentist office isn't legit and they're not on that journey. That's just not, my stuff's not going to end up in a dentist office.
For sure. I actually think that while you were talking, I was thinking about this. I think there's 2 reasons a lot of artists fall down that trap. One is the education system, the collegiate system, where they're very focused on telling you the lie that if you study art, you could be like an electrician or a plumber as a tradesman artist and be able to go and work and set your voice out there, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Doing the face this way, and this way. And then the capitalist idea, I'm a capitalist. It's given us all we're able to talk because of capitalism, not against it. But art getting trapped in a capitalist like system is it's a trap. And I think the two things, like colleges pumping out artists in a capitalist system, are just driving garbage. It's just driving people to not try, to not actually do the work of seeking what's inside themselves. I mean, I thought I was a great artist at 17, 18 years old, but I didn't live any kind of life that had any kind of interest in showing you like my experience on this planet, on this plane. But I look forward to the art I'm going to make when I'm in my 90s, if I get to that point, like what kind of life I've been able to lead. That's not been, trying to make, I'm the guy that paints flowers, right? I'm never going to be just a pigeonholed artist, because I didn't study art in college, and I have no desire to make one kind of product to sell as art. So I think that has a lot to do with young artists who are impressionable, who may otherwise be groundbreaking talents, that do not get the opportunity to explore that side of themselves because they're stuck in this pedigree, this path.
I think I think on the schooling side, you're right. You're either falling into and believing I'm going to be the artist that breaks the mold and can actually make money while I live, and I'm going to have it's not going to be a hobby, it's not going to be a passion, it's going to be my job, it's my career. That is a very unfulfilling route, right? Because you're not painting for yourself. Now here's the lie though, that isn't spoken. You paint, you create whatever you want, and the crowds will come along and they'll buy anything you got because, wow, you're just amazing. That's the unspoken lie of art school. Look, one of the forks in the road was go to West Point, go to Indiana University to study art for 4 years. That was a hard fork. What would my life look like right now had I gone that route? My wife sent me a link. She's like, oh, there's going to be 3 art fairs coming up in the area. Reach out. Here's an email. Reach out. See what $250 for a booth to display my art. That's that rate. So time, the day, really 2 days, set up, take down, sit at the booth, the $250. So lost time, lost productivity, the flat rate. I got to buy all the prints up front. I got to sell $1,000 worth of stuff to break even.
Right.
And I'm going to be sitting next to a booth of somebody who painted rocks. But that person thinks that somebody lied to them and said, your rocks are going to make it in a capitalistic society. Right. And they produce 500 of them because they're going to sell them for $1. And they're going to be like, man, I'm going to make $36 today. I must spend 20 hours to make $36. There has to be a good mesh between, you have to have almost a mathematical relationship with your art and what makes financial sense. If I'm at the point now where it might take me till I'm 90 to recover from the costs of the supplies, the damage that I've done, dude, I have paint all over my house. Like, why is there a red scratch 8 feet high in the hallway? Because I was carrying an 8-foot, you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah.
It's like, okay, well, now there's a wall I have to replace, or I have to paint, or the carpet. Like, because it doesn't matter how many drop cloths I put down. I swear to God, the paint finds a way to miss the drop cloth, and it ends up on the carpet. And, I've been in the same house for the last 7 years. Yeah, that room is destroyed. There's little clumps of paint that just aren't coming out, which means the whole carpet's got to be replaced someday. Like, if I ever want to set, like, man. And my wife, we share an office. So every day she goes into the office, AKA my studio, I'm going to get a reminder of, hey, remember when you didn't put a drop cloth down? I'm like, but I did. She goes, and you missed. Forget the big paintings that I do in the garage. Oh, forget the garage. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'm going to have to sell a lot of stuff to break even, but it's the process. So either I worry about the commercial aspect of it and I create just to sell, but then there's no heart in it, or I don't worry about the cost, beg for forgiveness, pick up a side job and, try to replace the carpet by myself. Like there has to be some kind of conversation within yourself to understand what it is you're trying to create and why you're doing it. And if you can answer those questions, then you'll understand, do I need to be more altruistic or do I need to be more capitalistic in my approach to the end state of my creativity? What am I trying? What's my end state? Am I just trying to sell? Then I would paint different things. I had a here's an example. I had actually a guy who lives near me. He's a sponsor of the Bird's Eye View project, the 7X community, right? He lives maybe like 10 minutes away from me. And so I put out maybe like 8 months ago, I'm moving to Germany. I need to liquidate everything. A lot of my paintings are on stretched out I can't take them all with me. Like I'm getting rid of everything. It's got to go. Rock bottom prices. So he's like, oh, I have some friends that just bought like an 8,000 square foot house. I'm like, oh, they got money. And he's like, can they come over and see your stuff? I'm like, absolutely. And I'm like, should we get some wine? Should we get like a little cheese board action? I've never hosted my house as a gallery. Like these people got money. Like I've never rubbed shoulders with the upper crust of society that are art shop.
Right.
Oh, like I've sold some prints, that's not the same. So so they come in and so they're like, are you a full-time artist? I'm like, no, I have a job. And they're like, oh, what's your job? And I'm like, and I realized right then on their face, do you think this house came from me selling prints? But their reaction right away when they found out I wasn't a full-time artist, they were like, oh,
Right.
like, oh, you must not be a real artist then.
That's a thing. I've come across that too.
And I'm like, how do you think I got 2 kids and a wife? How do you think I feed them? By selling prints, $30 prints? So a lot of this on this the capitalism side of it is you have to know your why. It always comes back to that. Why are you creating? Because it then turns into a story. It's a narrative. People are buying the painting or the creation, but they want to, and this is something I've realized, they want to put it up on their wall. When somebody comes over to their house, they need a story that goes with the painting, and you, the artist, are the story.
Right.
They're going to flex their muscle. You just put pictures of your kids up. We're connoisseurs of art. Let me tell you about this artist, and then you'll know how great of a connoisseur of art I am, because I patronize, a Green Beret artist who's struggling with PTSD, and this is the emotion that you see. It becomes like a wine. Do you taste the oakiness? Do you see the pain and the struggle of his PTSD in the brushstroke work and slap a bunch of military and artistic buzzwords together?
Visceral.
And you've given the buyer a story. Can I do that in good conscience? Absolutely not.
Right.
So I just say, hey, this is my stuff. I'll show you all my stuff from the generic to the erotic. They're over in this closet, so my kids can't see it. I'll show you everything to give you a range of what I can either create, what you have available right now, or what I can create for you. They never got over the fact that I had a job.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
They're like, well, so they pull up on their phone. They're like, can you paint this? I'm like, you want me to paint another carbon copy of another artist's work? I'm like, now when you're growing as an artist, imitation isn't just the highest form of flattery. It is a tried and true approach to learning technique.
Absolutely.
Right? If you want to master a technique, then follow the steps that somebody else who's already mastered it and learn through that process. And then you have a side-by-side comparison. This is what a master's piece looks like. I tried the same materials, the same techniques. This is what mine looks like. There's some room for improvement. Try again, and keep getting better. But at some point, once you've mastered the technique, or before then, or when you feel it's comfortable, you need to start creating your own pieces with those techniques instead of just copy and pasting. After 15 years, I'm not copy and pasting other people's stuff. Like, I know I can clearly tell you're rich if you're moving into a mansion like that, but I don't even have a price that I can offer you that I'm going to copy and paste somebody else's thing just so you can have an original, but it's not an original. It would be an original of mine, but not that. I'm just not there as an artist.
It's derivative. Yeah.
It's just chasing the money. I just gave up on chasing the money as an artist, and I'm accepting the fact that I will have to have a job and part-time jobs so I can have a hobby, you know?
But painting is more than a hobby for you though, Bryce, right? Because you do use it to really kind of regulate and get yourself, in a headspace.
100%. It's hobby. Yeah. I'm 110 paintings in. It's a little bit more than a hobby.
It's an obsession.
So like right now I'm living in Germany, trying to start a new career. It's not working very well because I can't get a visa. So it looks like I'll be moving back to Texas with my family. But like when I've been here for a month and I've knocked out 4 paintings,
That's like, crazy, man.
It's insane because Friday night I'm off work. I wake up, I make my bacon, the same thing I eat every day, bacon and eggs, because I don't really care what I eat as long as it's warm and it's fills me up. My wife's disgusted by my bachelor diet. She's like, you eat bacon and eggs for breakfast, you eat steak cooked in the bacon fat for lunch. And I go, sometimes I vary it up. Sometimes I add mushrooms. Sometimes I add onions. Sometimes I get crazy and I add both. She's like, what do you eat for dinner? I'm like, more of the lunch, like sausages and onions and mushrooms. And so since I don't have to think about eating or grocery shopping or meal planning, there's some Saturdays I might paint for 12 hours straight, 14 hours straight, only stopping when the hunger is driving me insane. And then I eat and I get back on there. And then Sunday I do the exact. So I can easily knock out close to 30 hours in a weekend in between Friday night, Saturday and Sunday. But you can get pretty far in 30 hours on a painting. And then I'm in an Airbnb. And so like I've moved the entire Airbnb around so I can videotape and time lapse and all the lighting, the little desk side lamps pre-positioned so I don't create too many shadows and I can see what I'm working on. And then I have to stare at it Monday through Friday if it's not finished by the weekend, and it drives me insane. So it'll be like, all right, I come off work, I go to jujitsu, and it's 9:30 at night, and I'm going to paint for 15 minutes because I have to chip away because I hate staring at an unfinished painting.
Same.
So like, it's better if the painting's in another room, if I have to look at it every night. But what I've discovered over the last month is I'll think I'm finished. And as I'm working at my computer and I keep looking at it, I'm like, oh, there's a mistake there, or that doesn't look right. I need to change this. I need to blend here. And then I have to stop my job because I can't. Like now we're doing this because I'm at the office. Finally started coming to an office versus working remote because I can't sit and look at an unfinished painting. It drives me insane. And then I see a mistake and I have to fix it right then. It's like when you have to create, everything shuts down, and it's almost like a little bit of an artistic OCD. Like nothing nothing in life can be as more important as fixing whatever it needs to be fixed on that painting so I can just get it off. I can't make a little note and be like, oh, I'll come back to that later. No. It happened right now.
Yeah, it's happening right now.
Yeah, I'm prairie dogging it right now. Like it's going to happen. So it's a little bit of an obsession. Yeah.
Well, I just want to make one more comment. Really liked early on you were talking about when you're painting, you're kind of everything's coming up at once. It's almost like your mind is decoupled and you're allowed to process all these emotions at one time. And I'm just pointing that out because your work is very layered, right? Even if you have images of women, there's layers and there's different things that come through the paintings that may or may not be expected. And that to me is like that. I can see that you're feeling and thinking a lot of different things at one time because it's coming through the image at me. So I just want to comment on that. And
I don't think a lot of people understand, though most people will just look at a piece, a finished product They either like it or they don't, and they move on. The attention span has gotten so short. So I'll look on purely out of curiosity. I used to do like a minute long video time lapse with a song. And if in part to to understand the paintings, you have to listen to the song and you have to dig into the lyrics and maybe do an investigation of why do you think, like reading a poem, what do you think the artist was trying to convey here by this song in these specific lyrics? Like how does it, if you're only looking at the picture, you're missing like 40% of it. Like the narrative comes through the video and the process and the lyrics that I match with that. Like I spend hours, sometimes the painting finds the song, and sometimes the song inspires the painting. But so I'm like, are people getting it? Do people, and I see like the average on a 30-second video, because I understand people aren't paying attention. So I've gone from a minute to 30 seconds. And now I'm trying to get it down to like 20 to 25 seconds. And some of them I'm like, I can't. This song, this video, this time lapse has to be 38 seconds because if I cut it in shorter, I miss the lyrics in the song. And then nobody will know the true meaning. They could ask me, but most people don't ask, what does this painting actually mean? But if they look at the painting and they listen to the lyrics that I match with it, they're going to get 80% of the meaning. But most people, because of our scrolling attention span, I think the average is anywhere between 4 and 8 seconds. You're only getting 40% of the meaning because you're just, I saw the finished product, move on. And I think when you're if you're chasing the crowd, if you're chasing the algorithm, if you're chasing the money that may or may not come from your art, you have to look at those things. When I look at those numbers, I just get sad. I don't look at it as lost revenue or lost followers. I don't look at it as like unengaged followers. I look at it as I'm only painting for myself. And you had an opportunity to understand the story. And I feel bad because you missed out. And that's their right. That's their prerogative. I don't need their validation. Sometimes you want something for other people more than they want it for themselves.
100%.
And maybe my painting isn't the vehicle that they're going to find it. Maybe they're not even looking for it. And so sometimes your art, your songs, your poems, whatever it is that you're creating are seeds. You throw them out like the parable. You throw them out. You don't know where those seeds are going to land. I'm working on I'm in a phase right now where I was just wrapping up a bunch of like, we'll say darker. So I did a survey, right? What do my followers want to see? You want to see more chicks? You want to see more nudity, some lingerie? Do you want to see more military stuff? Do you want to see more dark stuff? And the dark and the females tied. All right, good. I didn't really want to do too many military ones anymore anyways. So I've been doing more dark, edgier ones with females. And I showed my wife, I'm like, hey, this one or this one? What do you think? She goes, yeah, I don't even want to look at either one of them. Like I have a visceral reaction to look away. And I'm like, okay, so too dark. She's like, yeah, like you can paint it if you want, but like within a second, I have a visceral reaction of look away. Like that's really dark, hard to look at. And I'm like, wow, that's not the reaction I'm looking for either. Okay, so now I know because my litmus is my wife. If he can't even look at it for more than a minute, because I do everything up digitally first before I create it. I've gone the route of like, let's spend 40 hours on this painting only to find out my wife hates it. Or the person I'm commissioned it hates it. So let me work and learn Photoshop, learn how to paint on the computer, show you a digital mock-up. Do you like this? Okay, now send me the money. Then I create this, right? Versus let me paint it for you. You're the artist. Be inspired. I trust you. And then they're like, I'm not buying that. That's a bad business model. And so the ones that I'm working on right now are dark, but they're more introspective. And they're, one of them is basically demonic in nature, but it also tells the story of salvation. So it just depends on what you're looking at, right? But if you don't listen to the lyrics, you're not going to understand the story. So it's, but again, it's just, I'm going to spend, 100 hours on this painting. That's 100 hours that I get to wrestle with the idea of salvation and overcoming and the casting away of the demons and being pulled out of the mire. That's me and my journey. I can't force people to come along for the ride.
Right. Well, that's a great place to end right there. Cool. Bryce, thank you for coming by the Birds in the Sky podcast. If it's cool with you, I'd love to show some of your work. While we're talking, I'll pop it in and we can exchange through email and stuff like that. Sure. I like the recent one you put up on Instagram. I think it was yesterday, titled Fractured. I think it was.
Yeah.
That looks like a broken mirror kind of scenario. I just really love the layers that you use, not just like thematic layers, but the actual painting layers that come through as well. Thanks again, man.
Thanks. I enjoyed the conversation.
For sure, man. We're going to end right here.
I'm not a talker.
Yeah, I didn't have to say too much at all.
I'm sorry. You had to pull it out. I'm an introvert by nature.
No, it was great, man. I think this is hugely powerful. I think for people that are, especially art students, I think can gain a lot of insight from this. So like, just like cautionary tale kind of stuff and being true to themselves and be wary of snake oil salesmen in the space. So
get a real job.
Yeah. Get a haircut, get a real job.
And listen, you say get a haircut. Right before this, I went into the bathroom and put a bunch of water on it because my hair was like, it was like over to one side. And I'm just like, I look like an artist, but that is not presentable. And so I'm trying to add it all down, look respectable. Like, yeah, I'm trying.
Awesome. Bryce, thanks so much, man.
Later, buddy.